Hello and welcome to our third episode. Our last two episodes took us to both Northern and Southern California. For today, we're taking a trip back in time into an area I originate from, the Midwest. So please, come in, take a seat, have a drink, and relax. I won't get into what part of the Midwest I'm from, but from the story, we will be around the area of Bowling Green, Ohio. For anyone who's not from Ohio, you may be shocked to find out that Ohio is known as Haunted Ohio. Due to the violent history in both war and horrific incidences, there are thousands of first-hand haunting cases. This story takes place in the year 2006, and it comes from a very close friend of mine named Ray, as well as those who were with him that night. Now, at the time, Ray was 16 years old and a skater kid. He had long curly brown hair and always kept a skateboard on him. He went to a small high school in the middle of nowhere. He had a very close, but yet odd group of friends. They all grew up together, which to be honest isn't that impressive when you live in a small town and go to a high school of only a few hundred kids. There was 5 in the group, originally 6, but the 6th moved to the town I lived in at the time, which is how I met Ray and became such good friends with him. Of the 5, there was Brittany, a blonde-haired, more preppy girl of the group. She was a popular girl and was even a varsity volleyball player who already got scholarships to college. Although not sharing the same styles or even liking the same music, she still fit in very well. They made very little jokes about her looking like a Barbie. Then there was Brittany's best friend, Laura. Laura has dyed black hair from her original light brown. She was very slim, had an eyebrow piercing, and multiple ear piercings. She mostly wore large band hoodies and checkered Vans. Next, and finally, was the twins. There was Brian and Ben. For the most part, they were very similar. Both were tall, 6 foot, a little beefier, and both skateboarded a little bit. The only real difference was Brian had a mohawk and played the bass guitar, and Ben had a shaved head and played a 6-string guitar. They both played in the same band and pretty much acted the same, which was pretend rock stars. Ben, however, was dating Laura at the time, which, as Ray told me, was always an off and on relationship. When I first met Ray, he was energetic, charismatic, and overall a laugh. I knew him for 3 years before the incident that I'm about to tell you. I also want to say that the incident changed everyone in the group. Everyone, their lives would be different if they just would have stayed home that day, but sadly, that's not the case with this story. It began the summer of 2006. Brittany had her license for a little over a year, and her parents finally was giving her a little slack to drive around with her friends and not really have any real destination. With this new liberty, the group took it upon themselves to figure out what's the wildest thing they could do on their first night out. "We could go to the Attack Attack concert in Toledo," Brian said with excitement. "That's not until next week," Laura replied with annoyance in her voice. "Why don't we go to the skate park in Perrysburg?" Ray said, knowing that he was the only one who would want to go do this. "Really? It's the first time we can go anywhere and you want to go to a skate park?" Laura replied in a condescending tone. The group sat there for about 15 minutes going back and forth until the idea was agreed upon. "Ghost hunting?" Ray asked. "Yeah, there is like haunted places we can go to at night and they're supposed to be super scary," Ben replied. "I don't know, how scary?" Brittany asked with a bit of tremble in her voice. "Oh, relax, Barbie," Laura said with a smile. "We got 2.5 strong men with us." The group shared a laugh, and it took Ray a few minutes to realize that he was the half. With everything decided, the group began their ghost hunting trip. They first stopped at a famous haunted bridge just as the sun was going down. This bridge was infamous for a woman driving a bus of children into a lake, which sadly ended with everyone on board drowning. The story with this one is that if you put baby powder on your rear window and put your car into neutral, the ghost of the children will try to push your car away from the evil woman. If you didn't understand the point of the baby powder, the rumor is that you'll get small little handprints on your rear window, which is from the children trying to push your car away. After about 20 minutes or so of the group sitting there, once the creepy vibe began to tip, they headed to their next site. It was now a little bit darker, and the group found themselves in a back road surrounded by forest. The forest ghost story is a little bit unique, as there's a few different versions of it. The most popular one is of a family driving that road at night and crashing their car. They say that if you drive there at night, that you'll see headlights, and then when you pass them, there'll be no car there. Another one is saying that the father of the car who crashed the car is out there screaming, yelling for his family, and you can hear it. Now, I've been there, and it's definitely a little off at night. I can tell you that there's something strange with that forest. Even one time when I was sitting there with my friends, we had the radio turn on by itself to a station that we didn't even have it on, which was classical music. So it's actually an interesting place. But back to the story. Just as the scary feeling began to fade, just like it did before, the group headed to their last destination, which would change their life forever. I need to say some disclaimers, which I'm sure is pretty obvious. The names of the people involved have been changed, as well as I've never actually given the locations of these areas. And for this last location, I will change a lot of details to make sure that people can't find it due to the nature of what happened there. And I do not want anyone going looking for it and the same thing happening to them. The final stop on their hunting expedition was an old Victorian semi-mansion. I say semi-mansion as it was larger than most of the homes in the area, but it's not like a celebrity's 30,000 square foot home. Now, the story of the Victorian is shrouded in mystery. It's said that a long time ago, during the Civil War, it was a hidden clinic for wounded soldiers to go. Of course, all the soldiers that went there never actually survived. It was rumored that the doctor that was there was actually helping the Confederate cause. Some people believe it was some kind of satanic chapel or worship there. It's not really known. The next chapter, which is a little bit more defined, is about a family who lived in the home, each dying of random incidences. For example, the child fell down the stairs and broke their neck. The wife caught herself on fire while tending the fireplace, and the husband fell off the roof. This was a little bit more recent history, which is why it's more of a defined story. But the final chapter, and the reason why the building is actually condemned. Some years back, a brother and sister bought this home. The sister suffered from mental problems, which gave her hallucinations as well as hearing voices. It's rumored that she actually killed someone in the town not too far from the property. It was said that the sheriff at the time actually let her go live with her brother as they were remote away from the town, and he promised to take care of her. The short story of what transpired in this house is that the woman who struggled with these issues ended up killing a woman who was sent there to help her. When she did that, she also poked out her eyes and pierced her ears so she could no longer see or hear her hallucinations. When the brother found her like this, he did his best to take care of her and help heal her, but she died of her wounds. The brother was riddled with guilt as he did not take care of his sister well enough and hung himself in the living room. The dead bodies were not discovered for many years later when a family friend finally came to check on the house. Afterwards, the house was condemned. The rumor is that the house is haunted by many angry ghosts, as well as people who have entered, die. This leads us to our group now. There is no direct way to the mansion, as the back roads have been slowly covered by vegetation, so the group had to park their car on a preserved road and left a note saying that the battery was dead and they'd be back in the morning. Ben thought the note was very clever, as if someone drove by and reported it and it got towed. However, the group didn't really think it was that much of a big deal as they weren't planning on being gone that long and it's in the middle of nowhere, most likely no cars are driving by. The group began to walk through the woods in the direction they believed the mansion to be. At first, they believed they walked too far as they could no longer see the road they parked on, only darkness and a line of trees. But, to the persistence of Brian, the group continued. They knew they were almost there as they could see a slight clearing in the vast sea of trees. As they emerged from the dark woods to the more open area, they could see a rundown Victorian home. The home was obviously in disrepair, with windows broken, wooden boards hanging from all over, and even a large bird's nest on top of the turret. The group slowly made their way to the door. Before entering, Brittany began to panic. "I don't think this is a good idea, guys," she said, with both hands clasped against her mouth. It's fine, it's just an empty house, Brian said as he put his arm around her and began to guide her to the large, peeling white painted door. As the group reached the door, they slowly moved the knob. As they tried to turn it, it became clear that the door was locked. As Ray was telling me this part of the story, he said he wished that they would have took the locked door as a sign and just would have left. Their lives would have been different. But they were young, dumb, and stubborn. That's why both Brian and Ben began to kick the door open until it gave way. The sound of wood snapping and brackets of brass hitting the floor, echoing in the dark recesses of the once beautiful home. The group slowly entered and began to look around. The home smelled of mold, and inside matched the out. The wallpaper was peeling all around. The broken floorboards scattered throughout the home. Signs of dirt, dust, and cobwebs everywhere the eye could see. "This place is kind of cool," Ray said, but no one replied. "Like a Marilyn Manson video or something," Ray said again, but the group was still quietly observing the area. Ben turned on the old flashlight they brought with them. The yellowish-orange glow barely lit up a few feet in front of them. The group began to slowly make their way through the first floor of the home. The front door led them to a hallway with 2 rooms, one to the left, one to the right, and a staircase right in the center of the hallway. As they entered the left room, which appeared to be a parlor, there was an old, dirty Victorian-style couch facing an old cobweb-infested fireplace. In the center of the room was a grand piano with a broken leg, and it sat sideways on the floor. The group looked around with the flashlight, barely lighting the area. They moved from the parlor to the dining room, which led them to tall ceilings with ripped, dirty curtains hanging from the top. The table in the middle of the room was long, with multiple chairs, some broken, some still pushed against the table, most likely untouched for multiple decades. As the gang entered the kitchen, they noticed another set of stairs leading to the next floor. "Let's go up then," Brian said, already walking towards the staircase. The group forced to follow Ben, as he was the only one with the flashlight. Wait, Brittany pleaded. "It's late, let's just go home." As Brittany finished talking, Brian and Ben looked at each other, as if talking telekinetically. "Let's just look upstairs and then we'll go. I promise," Ben said, while still slowly making his way upstairs. The boards creaked and squeaked as the teens slowly made their way to the second floor. As they reached the top, they were yet again met with a wide hallway, but now on each side laid multiple doors. They tried the first door on the right, but to their surprise it was locked. They proceeded to the next, and just as before, the door would not budge. They continued down the hallway, trying door after door until one finally clicked. As the door creaked open, a cloud of dust hit Ben right in the face, causing him to cough and quickly wipe his face rapidly, as if he could push off the dust already in his lungs. "You okay?" Ray asked, with his hands on Ben's shoulders. "Yeah, just dust," Ben replied. As the group's attention moved from Ben to the room, they noticed dead flowers in dirty vases scattering the room. The plants surrounding an old bed so caked in dust that it almost looked black. As the orange light slowly moved, illuminating the long-forgotten bed to the end of the room, there was a large hole in the center of an old wooden wall. "That's how they got the doors locked," Brian said with excitement. Laura, who has been quiet this whole time, most likely trying to seem tough, spoke. "I got a bad feeling. I think we should go." Brittany shook her head in agreement, but both the twins already made the conscious decision to enter the mysterious hole in the wall. Ben, the first one to enter, followed by Brian, then Lauren, then Brittany, and Ray at the end. The hole was a tight fit for the twins, but easy for the rest of the group. The first thing the group noticed was the smell. The only way to describe it would be the smell of rotten meat that has been left out in the sun for all day. The room itself was actually 2 more bedrooms, but the walls dividing them had been knocked down. The room was filled with old furniture, which dictated the path the group had to take to continue their expedition. As they made it halfway through the room, the smell only got worse. As they reached the second room, the orange light began to move to an old trunk that was set center of 3 dirt-covered mirrors. Ben and Brian shared a glance again, and Brian moved to where the light was pointing. At this point, the group went from creeped out to full-on scared. Even if the large teen boys wouldn't admit it, their hearts were racing just as fast as the girls. Brian slowly put his hand on the trunk, and in his surprise, the lid was a lot heavier than he anticipated. He then adjusted and pushed hard, causing the lid to slam back and break the center mirror. Everyone in the group jumped at the sound of the mirror shattering and quickly covered their noses as the smell of rotten meat hit their face. As each member slowly moved their arms or hands from their noses, they began to look at the illuminated chest. Stuffed inside was what appeared to be a man. His arms bent to a degree they are not meant to be. His skin dried but melted at the same time. The one hand that was visible was missing 3 out of the 5 fingers. The group was hit with terror, and they began to panic. They all turned and ran to the hole in the wall. Quickly as they ran, the other mirrors began to shatter. Ray was the first one through the hole, then Brittany, then Laura, then Brian. Ben struggled as he tried to get through the small hole. In the group's panic state, they all began to tug and pull on Ben, trying to get him through the wall. Slowly, the boards began to break, and Ben was sent flying through the wall, tipping over everyone. Before the group could stand, the door to the room, and even the other doors that were locked, began to open and slam shut repeatedly. Brittany began to scream. Laura began to cry. Ben quickly stood up, pulled the door to the room open, and everyone ran out the room. As the group made their way to the hallway, they all froze in their places. Towards the stairs to the kitchen, now peeking out of the once locked room, was a woman, her hand gripped on the door and her face sideways, peering at the group. This caused them to panic, turn, and run to the other staircase behind them. Ray, Laura, and Brittany are the first ones to make it down the stairs. Brian and Ben both side by side as they ran until one of the stairs gave way, causing Brian to fall over, breaking the railing and falling headfirst to the floor. His neck twisted, his eyes open, but staring into nothingness. The girls, and soon Ben, made it to their friend. Ben quickly picked his brother up, pulling him by his arms and chest, and began to drag him. As they made their way to the front door, Ryan, who was the last one out, looked up the stairs and saw a woman in a white dress peering down at him. He quickly ran out the door, and the group stopped in the middle of the woods, everyone breathing heavily, Ben more so as he was dragging his lifeless brother. As the group catch their breath, Ben began to try to wake his brother, but no matter how much he shook, yelled, or begged, his brother's eyes never blinked and his chest never moved. They made their way back to the car and used Brittany's emergency flip phone to call the police. The police investigation found a local man who went missing some time ago, stuffed in the chest. They searched the whole property and found no signs of a woman or anyone who was there other than the group. Brian was announced dead on arrival, and the police closed out the case, saying that the teens were most likely high and had an hallucination, and it was an accident which caused Brian's death. When I said their lives would be different if they never would have went to that house, I meant it. It's been 14 years, and according to Ray, none of his friends even talk to each other anymore. Some turned to drugs, some had problems with the law, and some just moved on with their lives and did everything they could to forget that night. As for Ray, he continued to move on with his life. He had a wife, a kid, and worked a pretty decent job. One thing Ray did tell me about that night, and it sticks with him to this day. When he was the last one out the door, and he looked up at the staircase at that woman, he noticed that she didn't have any eyes